Hey everybody, it's Mr. Fabeck here, and we have another Fabiology edition, and we're going to talk about artificial versus natural selection. So we're going to talk about Darwin and kind of what led to his ideas, but more importantly, we're going to talk about puppies and a little bit about this idea of what dog breeding is and kind of how that plays a role and kind of what to think about when we compare artificial and natural selection. So here's our goals. So by the end of the video, we want you to be able to just find and use an example of artificial and natural selection and be able to explain Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. So here we go. Here's some examples. So artificial selection, let's start with that. Artificial means fake, right? We have artificial turf or grass you see on maybe soccer or football fields, but that's not real grass, obviously, right? So artificial selection is what Darwin was using when he was thinking about, well, how do these organisms come to be? And artificial selection is where humans are selecting desirable traits. So examples are dog breeding. He noticed that, okay, we have some of these very unique dogs and they've been developed over time. Some are hunting dogs, so like we have pointers and retrievers and Labradors and all that. And some were like little dogs like Westies or, some of those like Scotties that were supposed to chase out rodents and things like that. Or some were just beautiful, wonderful companion dogs, like my little pups here, Samantha and Maggie, just a gorgeous-looking sleeping puppies. And then Rosie, who kind of has a similar look to me, which is kind of weird. But anywho, adorable. We both, obviously she's got her water and I have my coffee. But we have this idea of we're choosing traits that were desirable or that we wanted. And so people have been doing this for centuries, if you will, right? Thinking about how do we build a better cow? How do we get one that has nice beef, right? We have our Angus beef cow, but then we have the super cow. This is not Photoshop. This is a real cow. So we can get more meat to make more food and maybe make us some more money. Or even thinking about horse racing in general. You want to make more money. You want a faster horse. We want a horse that we could breed with another fast horse to hopefully have an even faster horse in the end. So that's what Darwin was thinking. He was like, if nature provides the variation for humans to select, then this must happen in nature too. This must happen all on its own. So that is where he came up with this idea of evolution by natural selection. Okay? So over reproduction, that's the first part. As organisms are reproducing, we naturally make more than are going to survive. Okay, so over-reproduction is the first part. We have a struggle to exist. Okay, so when we think about, the lynx and the rabbits, well, the rabbits are going to make a ton of rabbits. They'll make like 8 at a time because they know not all of them are going to survive, right? And so we have this competition happening due to this over-reproduction, right? When we think about any sort of resource, whether it's food, water, shelter, or mates, right? We can see here like these two elk here are really butting heads, or this frog pool here, all these frogs competing to try and get to the mate, or even like these trees, right, and these plants trying to find the best soil to get the best sunlight and the best resources, or even who puts on the better show when we look at birds, right? Who's got the most beautiful, grandiose feathers that's going to get a better mate, and maybe this leads to a better chance at these adaptations may be better for survival, or, being able to reproduce. So, it's this idea that there's too many there anyway, and so we're going to over-reproduce, and this naturally makes competition. Okay, so we have over-reproduction. That's our first part of evolution. Okay, there's 4 parts total. So since we've been talking a little bit about evolution, probably we're going to get these 2 words that you may have heard before. So just a quick rundown. An adaptation is any characteristic that helps an organism survive and reproduce. So like I said over here, right, where you have, adaptations like these giant feathers that might help it produce, these antlers here, again, that might help you win the battle or fend off with somebody trying to eat you, right, or the lion and their claws and speed and cunningness, or being able to run faster or grow a little bit taller there to get to more resources. So adaptations are anything that can help you survive and reproduce. Fitness is when we say something's more fit, it describes on how well an organism is able to reproduce in its environment. So this is kind of how we use the words. So, adaptation, again, are characteristics. Fitness is about reproduction. So individuals who are more fit have a better chance of passing adaptations to the next generation. So let's say it's that idea of you have an adaptation that allows you to run faster, then you are more fit to reproduce because you're going to get a chance to get more food, and therefore you are going to be able to pass those adaptations and the generations might become faster. Or when we think about giraffes next, right? With Lamarck versus Darwin, Darwin talked about some giraffes just had longer necks. They had an adaptation that helped them survive, and therefore they were more fit in that environment because they could get more food, and then they were able to reproduce, okay, and pass those on to the next generation, okay? So when we look about the idea of survival of the fittest, that was a common phrase that we say with Darwin, or the making of the fittest, which is some books by Carroll. Darwin was saying, okay, there's natural variation, right? He used that idea of artificial selection to say that there's natural variation out there among individuals in a population. And then, to build on that, some organisms are going to have adaptations to their environment that have them have a better chance at surviving and reproducing. So like, think about this idea altogether. So far we have over-reproduction. This plant, these pollens, I mean, those are all seeds. There's just a boatload of pollen that are making seeds that all of them are not going to be able to survive. If you think about the sheer amount of seeds that are produced by a tree, not all of them find the right spot or are able to survive and then grow. Same idea with our flowering and our bees. You got to be able to attract those organisms to help you spread those seeds, or adaptations that help you survive in your environment. Like this environment, clearly we have a frog here, if you can see him, that has this pattern in this shape that helped it blend in and use that camouflage. So this organism had an adaptation to help it survive, so it makes it more fit for the environment, because now we have a population of frogs that look just like this so that it can reproduce. Same thing here. We have our blue jean frog, our poison dart frog. It has developed an adaptation where it has inherited this characteristic of having a toxicity to it. So organisms learned that those looks, this frog that looks like that is going to not make you feel good, so don't eat it. And so organisms, the predators, have learned to avoid them, right? And so, or they've learned to digest them. Others have developed a variation, or they had a variation that allowed them to digest these. So there's a whole gambit, right? When we think about predator-prey and this flux of how they're interacting in their community. But the idea is that we are over-reproducing so far. So some are going to survive because they have a natural variation that's an adaptation that helps them, right? They've inherited some characteristic that helped them survive, and then they were able to reproduce. So, variation, and then we have how do we pass that on, right? So this is something that Lamarck and Darwin both agreed, is that we had them pass it on. And I love this picture because this is the idea of the tree of life, right? This organism was able to survive and then passed on these traits, but then there had to be some other characteristics, and now we're all connected. So this is right from Darwin's book, and I like how it says, I think this is how it is. And he didn't know anything about heredity, right? Mendel didn't come until later. He knew nothing about genetics. He just knew that you passed on part of you or your traits. So in like a bigger, grander scale, if we look at like a common elephant or elephants around, right? If we look at our evolutionary timeline millions of years ago, we want to think about where did these trunks happen? Where do we get these different features? And as they developed over time to our common elephants and our modern day elephants, we've had these slight variations over time, and due to their environment, some had a variation or an adaptation that helped them survive and then help them reproduce. And so that is why we have our everyday elephants now. So that's Darwin's theory. So in summary, here's 4 parts that he wrote in his book, The Origin of Species. Variation occurs among individuals. Boom. Competition because we over-reproduce. Survival of the fittest. Those best suited for the environment will survive and reproduce, passing traits to the next generation. And then we have descent with modification. That idea of when we pass the traits, we're changing slightly, right? We know that We have sperm and egg cells combining, so we get a little combination difference, that this idea of sex is leading towards differences. And when we can think about what he didn't know about mutations in a DNA code, slight mutations can lead to modifications, okay? So this is what Darwin's theory is in a nutshell, okay? So make a mastery check here. We're going to have to make a Venn diagram to compare and contrast artificial and natural selection. Pick 3 different organisms, plant or animal, things you already know, and describe the environment it lives in, and state an adaptation that helps it or makes it more beneficial to live there. And then a big mastery check, okay? Scenario: you're growing a garden to sell vegetables and flowers at the farmer's market. You notice a lot of beetles are eating your plant leaves. That doesn't help your product. So you go out and you decide, I'm going to spray them with a bunch of pesticide to kill off all these bugs. But you didn't. Some of the bugs still survived. So I want you to explain, using this idea of natural selection and Darwin's idea of evolution by natural selection, explain why using the pesticide repeatedly will not fix the problem, but it's going to make it worse. Okay? So thank you, and I hope to see you guys soon. Bye.